Mama's boys. Sarah recently retired from her job of 23 years. Is Sarah working now? No, she's not working now. She retired from her job. How long had Sarah worked at her job? Well, 23 years. Sarah had worked at her job for 23 years. When did she retire? Well, recently. She recently retired. Did she retire a long time ago? No, not a long time ago. She recently retired. Where did she retire from? Or what did she retire from? Her job of 23 years. She retired from her job of 23 years. And who retired from her job of 23 years? Sarah. That's right. Sarah retired from her job of 23 years. Because she retired, Sarah has less money than she used to. Oh no. So does Sarah now have a lot of money? No, she doesn't. She doesn't have a lot of money. Does she have more money now? Or did she have more money in the past, before? Well, she had more money in the past. She had more money before. Why did she have more money before? Well, because she was working, right? Because she was working. She had more money in the past. Now, she is retired. Okay, so Sarah retired from her job of 23 years. Because she's retired, she has less money than she used to. Did she used to have more money? Yes, exactly. She used to have more money. In the past, she had more money. Did she used to have more money, or did she used to have less money? She used to have more money. And now, does she have more or less money? Well, now she has less. Why does she have less? Because she retired from her job. That's right, because she retired. Who used to have more money? Sarah. Sarah used to have more money. She used to have more money. Now she has less money. But she has enough money for herself. Okay, she has enough money for herself. Can she pay for food? Yes, she has enough money for herself. She can buy food. Does she have enough money for other people? No, she doesn't. She doesn't have enough money for other people. She only has enough money for herself. Why does she only have enough money for herself? Well, because she retired, right? She retired. Retired can be a verb, an action. She retired from her job. It's an action. Or an adjective. It describes. She is retired. She is retired. Or she retired from her job. Same word. Okay, so she used to have enough money for other people, but now she is retired. Also, now she has a problem. Oh no, another problem. Who has a problem? Sarah. Sarah has a problem. What is Sarah's problem? Oh, her problem is she has 2 sons. Does she have boys or does she have girls? She has boys. How many boys does she have? 2. She has 2 boys. Does she have enough money for her 2 boys? No, she doesn't. She doesn't have enough money for her 2 boys. And why not? Well, because she's retired now. She used to have enough money for her 2 boys, but now she doesn't have enough money for her 2 boys. So she has 2 sons. Who has 2 sons? Sarah has 2 sons. And what does she have? She has 2 sons. Sarah has 2 sons. One son is 23, and the other is 26. How old is the oldest son? Well, the oldest son is 26. The oldest son is 26. How old is the youngest son? Well, the youngest son is 23. So the youngest son is 23. The oldest son is 26. How many sons are there? There are 2 sons. One is 23, and the other is 26. What is the youngest son's name? Tony. The youngest son's name is Tony. And what is the oldest son's name? Is it Tony? No. The youngest son's name is Tony, not the oldest son. What is the oldest son's name? Dan. The oldest son's name is Dan. So Dan is the oldest, and Tony is the youngest. How old is Dan? Well, Dan is 26. How old is Tony? Tony is 23. Who is Dan's mother? Sarah. Sarah is Dan's mother, of course. And who is Tony's mother? Well, also Sarah, right? Also Sarah. Sarah is Tony and Dan's mother. So, Sarah has a problem. What is her problem? Well, she doesn't have enough money for Tony and Dan. She only has enough money for herself. So she has two sons. Both sons work. Does Tony have a job? Yes, Tony has a job. Both sons work. Does Dan have a job? Yes, Dan also has a job. So they both have jobs. They both work. However, they both live at home with their mom. Oh no. Where does Tony live? Well, he lives with Sarah. He lives with his mom. And Dan? Where does Dan live? Also at home with his mom. Tony and Dan live at home with their mom. So this is a big problem. Why is it a problem? Well, because they are older. They are adults, right? Tony is 23. Dan is 26. So they live at home with their mom. They eat her food and expect her to cook for them. So whose food do they eat? Sarah's, their mom's. They eat Sarah's food. Tony and Dan eat Sarah's food. Oh no. Do Tony and Dan buy Sarah's food? No, they don't. They don't buy her food. They only eat her food. Does Tony have money? Yes, he does. He has a job. Does Dan have money? Yes, he does. He also has a job. Tony and Dan have money, but they don't buy food. They eat Sarah's food. Does Sarah have enough money for Tony and Dan? No, she doesn't. She only has enough money for herself. What do Tony and Dan expect? Well, they expect Sarah to cook for them. Do they think she should cook for them? That's right. They think Sarah should cook for them. They expect her to cook for them. Do they expect her to clean their rooms also? Yes, they also expect her to clean their rooms. They expect her to cook for them, and they expect her to clean their rooms. Do Tony and Dan help Sarah clean the house? No, never. Tony and Dan never help Sarah clean the house. Only Sarah cleans the house. Do Tony and Dan help Sarah cook? No, never. Tony and Dan never help Sarah cook. Do Tony and Dan give money to Sarah? No, never. They never give money to her. They never clean the house, and they never cook. They expect her to cook. They expect her to clean. Do the boys do any chores at all? No, they don't. They never do any chores. Do they do any work in the house? Chores. Chores are work in the house. For example, cleaning the house is a chore. Washing dishes is a chore. Cooking food is a chore. So, do Tony and Dan do any chores? Never. They never do any chores. Where don't they do chores? In the house. They never do chores in the house. Whose house is it? Well, it's Sarah's house. They live in Sarah's house. How old are Tony and Dan? 23 and 26. Are Tony and Dan children? No, they're not children. They're 23 and 26. They are adults. Also, they don't pay for food or anything else. They don't do chores, and they don't pay for food. They don't pay for rent. They don't pay for anything. Do Tony and Dan ever give their mom money? Never, never, never. They never give Sarah money. They never help Sarah with chores. But they expect her to cook. They expect her to clean. In short, they are mama's boys. Who are mama's boys? Tony and Dan. Tony and Dan are mama's boys. Is Tony a mama's boy? Yes, he is. Tony is a mama's boy. And Dan is also a mama's boy. Mama's boy means a boy who depends on his mother too much. Not independent. So a mama's boy is a boy who is not independent. A mama's boy is too close to his mom, to his mother. So a mama's boy is a boy too close to his mother. Or a mama's boy is a man who lives with his mother. In America, not good. So a man who lives with his mother, we say mama's boy. Tony and Dan are mama's boys. Is Tony independent? No, he's not. Tony's not independent. Tony is a mama's boy. Is Dan independent? No, he's not. Dan is also a mama's boy. Is it good to be a mama's boy? No, it's not good to be a mama's boy. It's bad to be a mama's boy. Who are mama's boys? Tony and Dan. Tony and Dan are mama's boys. Do they live with their mother? Yes, they do. They live with their mother. Sarah is sick of the situation. She thinks, they're adults. They should be living on their own and not still living with their mother. I'm going to kick them out. Is Sarah happy? No, she's not happy. She's sick of the situation. What is she sick of? Well, she's sick of Tony and Dan living with her. Why is she sick of the situation? Well, because they're mama's boys. They never help her. And they are adults. Does she like her boys to be mama's boys? No, she doesn't like her boys to be mama's boys. Does she have enough money? No, she doesn't have enough money. Why not? Because she's retired. She retired from her job. Now she doesn't have enough money. So she's sick of the situation. She's tired of the situation. She doesn't like the situation anymore. She's sick of the situation. She thinks, they're adults. They should be living on their own, not still living with their mother. Where should they be living? Well, on their own. Or how should they be living? On their own. Should they be living with their mom, or should they be living on their own? Well, they should be living on their own. Who thinks they should be living on their own? Well, Sarah. Sarah thinks they should be living on their own. And who should be living on their own? Tony and Dan. Tony and Dan should be living on their own. Why should they be living on their own? Because they are adults. Because they are 23 and 26. They should be living on their own. Where should they not be living? With their mother. They shouldn't be living with their mother. They should not be living with their mother. Should Dan be living with his mother? No, he shouldn't. He shouldn't be living with his mother. Where should Dan be living? On his own. Dan should be living on his own. He shouldn't be living with his mother. So, what is Sarah gonna do? She's gonna kick them out. Future, gonna, future. She's gonna kick them out. Who is she gonna kick out? She's gonna kick out Tony and Dan. Why is she gonna kick them out? She's gonna kick them out because they are 23 and 26. They are adults. Is she gonna make them leave? Yes, she is. She's gonna make them leave. Is she gonna make them live in another place? Yes, she is. She's gonna make them live in another place. Can they live with their mother in the future? No, they can't. She's gonna kick them out. She's gonna make them leave. She's gonna force them to leave. So during dinner that night, Sarah tells the boys, it's time for you two to take responsibility. You can't live with me anymore. I'm not going to cook for you. I'm not going to clean for you. You need to grow up and get your own apartments. Oh, sounds like my mother. Okay. Just joking. So when does Sarah tell the boys? During dinner. She tells the boys during dinner. And where does she tell the boys? Well, in the house, right? In their house. Dinner in their house. What does she tell the boys? Oh, she tells them they must leave. She tells them they must leave the house. She says, it's time for you two to take responsibility. Does she want them to be independent? Yes, she does. She wants them to be independent. She says, take responsibility. It means be independent, be strong. Who needs to take responsibility? Tony and Dan, the boys. They need to take responsibility. Why do they need to take responsibility? Well, because they're mama's boys. They're 23 and 26. It's time now. They need to take responsibility. Who wants them to take responsibility? Sarah. Sarah wants them to take responsibility. She says, it's time for you two to take responsibility. You can't live with me anymore. Will Sarah cook for them anymore? No, she won't. She won't cook for them anymore. Tomorrow, will Sarah cook for them? No, not anymore. She says, I won't cook for you anymore. So tomorrow, no cooking. Next week, no cooking. She won't cook for them anymore. Will she clean for them anymore? No, she won't. She won't clean for them anymore, and she won't cook for them anymore. Who won't she cook for? Tony and Dan. She won't cook for Tony and Dan anymore. In the past, would she cook for them? Yeah. In the past, she would cook for them. But in the future, she won't. She won't cook for them in the future. She would in the past, but she won't in the future. She said, you need to grow up and get your own apartments. Who needs to grow up? Well, Tony and Dan need to grow up. Why do they need to grow up? Well, because they never cook, they never clean, they never help their mother, because they're mama's boys. Is Sarah retired? Yes, Sarah's retired. How much money did she used to have? Well, enough. She used to have enough money for everyone, for Tony, for Dan, and for herself. But now, she doesn't have enough money for everybody. Who does she have enough money for? She has enough money for herself only. Who needs to grow up? Tony and Dan need to grow up. Do they need to be adults? Or do they need to be children? They need to be adults, right? They need to be mature. They need to be adults. Tony and Dan need to grow up. Tony and Dan need to be mature. Tony and Dan need to be adults. She says, you need to grow up and get your own apartments. How do the boys feel? Oh, they're upset. They're very upset. The boys are very upset. They complain. They rant and rave. Do the boys yell? Yes, they rant and rave. Why do they rant and rave? Because they're upset. Why are they upset? Oh, because their mom is kicking them out of the house. Is Sarah kicking them out? Yes, she is. She's kicking them out. Do the boys complain? Oh, yes, they complain. They rant and rave. Do both boys rant and rave, or only Tony? Both boys. Both boys rant and rave. They yell, they scream, ah, very loud. They rant and they rave. Who do they rant and rave at? Well, they rant and rave at Sarah. They yell at Sarah. They rant and rave at Sarah. They complain to Sarah. They rant and rave. They say, you are a terrible mom. How can you do this? We're your children. It's not fair. Oh, do they like Sarah now? No, they think she's a terrible mom. Is Sarah a terrible mom? No, she's not a terrible mom. She's a normal American mom. Are the boys mama's boys? Yes, they are. They're mama's boys. Oh, no. So what do they say? They say, you're a terrible mom. How can you do this? We're your children. It's not fair. What kind of mom do they think Sarah is? A terrible mom. They think Sarah's a terrible mom. And where are they? Well, they're in the house. They're in the house with their mother. And when does Sarah tell them? Well, during dinner. She tells them during dinner. What does she tell them? She tells them they must leave. She tells them they must get their own apartments. And what do the boys do? The boys rant and rave. They rant and rave and yell, you're a terrible mother. How can you do this? We are your children. It's not fair. The boys continue to rant and rave for 57 hours without stopping. Whew! Who rants and raves for 57 hours? The boys, Tony and Dan, rant and rave for 57 hours. How long do they rant and rave? They rant and rave for 57 hours. Who do they rant and rave at for 57 hours? Sarah. They rant and rave at Sarah. They rant and rave at Sarah for 57 hours. So they rant and rave at Sarah for 59 hours without stopping. No, not 59. They rant and rave at Sarah for 57 hours without stopping. Does Sarah change her mind? Does Sarah change her opinion? Does Sarah change her decision? Does Sarah change? No, she won't budge. She won't change. She will not change. Sarah won't budge. What do the boys want Sarah to do? Well, they want her to budge. They want her to change her mind, change her decision. But Sarah won't budge. What won't she budge about? Well, about kicking the boys out. She won't budge about kicking the boys out. She won't change her mind about kicking the boys out. How long do the boys rant and rave? For 57 hours. They yell and complain for 57 hours. They rant and rave for 57 hours. But Sarah won't budge. She won't change. Who won't budge? Sarah. Sarah won't budge. She tells them, you have 1 month to find your own apartment. No more whining. Just do it. Then Sarah leaves the room. Ooh, strong mom. Sarah says, you have 1 month to find your own apartment. No more whining. Just do it. Does she want them to continue complaining? No, she doesn't want them to keep complaining. She says, no more whining, complaining. No more whining. Who was whining? Well, Tony and Dan were whining, right? Tony and Dan were whining. Was Sarah whining? No. Sarah wasn't whining. Tony and Dan were whining. Why were Tony and Dan whining? Well, they were whining because Sarah was kicking them out of the house. They're whining because Sarah is kicking them out of the house. Oh no. So she says, no more whining. How long do they have to find an apartment? 1 month. They only have 1 month to find an apartment. Oh no, 1 month only. Sarah says, just do it. Then she leaves the room. The next day, the boys come to the kitchen for breakfast. But there's no food. Oh no, poor boys. Where do they go in the morning? Well, they go to the kitchen in the morning. Why do they go to the kitchen in the morning? They go to the kitchen in the morning for breakfast. Do they want to eat? Yes, they want to eat. They go to the kitchen for breakfast. What's the problem? The problem is there's no food. No food in the kitchen. Sarah refuses to cook for them. Does Sarah say, no, I won't cook for you? That's right, she refuses to cook for them. She will not cook for them. Oh no. She says, you have jobs. Get your own food and make it yourself. The boys can't believe it. Oh, no. Can the boys buy food? Yes, they can buy food. They have jobs. Can the boys cook? Yes, they can cook. They're 23 and 26. They can cook. They can buy food and they can cook. But they're mama's boys. They don't want to. So Sarah says, you have jobs. Get your own food and make it yourself. The boys can't believe it. This happens every day. The boys gradually lose weight because they won't cook for themselves. Oh no! Are the boys getting thinner or fatter? Well, the boys are getting thinner, right? They're losing weight. So, are they losing weight suddenly or just a little by little? Oh, well, they're losing weight little by little, gradually. They're gradually losing weight. Why do the boys gradually lose weight? Oh, because they won't cook for themselves. The boys won't cook for themselves, so they gradually lose weight. They little by little lose weight. Oh, no. Finally, on the 28th day, they look for an apartment. They find a 2-bedroom for $750 a month. They sign a 1-year lease. How much is the apartment? $750 a month. Is it an expensive apartment? Well, not in San Francisco, it's not. In San Francisco, it's a cheap apartment. How many bedrooms is it? 2. It's a 2-bedroom apartment. When do they find a 2-bedroom apartment? On the 28th day. On the 28th day, they find a 2-bedroom apartment. Who finds the apartment? Well, Tony and Dan together. They both find the apartment. How much is the rent? It's $750 a month. The rent is $750 a month. In San Francisco, that's a very cheap 2-bedroom apartment. The boys sign a 1-year lease. When do they find the apartment? On the 28th day, they find the apartment. And how long is the lease? The lease is 1 year. Do they sign a 1-year contract? Yes, they sign a 1-year lease. They promise to keep the apartment for 1 year. So they sign a 1-year lease. How much is the lease? Well, the lease is for $750 a month. The boys rush home to tell their mother. Do the boys go slowly to tell their mother? No, not slowly. The boys rush home. They speed home. They go fast home to tell their mother. Who do they want to tell? Their mother. They want to tell their mother. What do they want to tell her? Well, they want to tell her that they found an apartment. They're very excited because this will be their first apartment. So how do they feel? They're excited. Why are they excited? They're excited because it's their first apartment. Who do they tell? They tell their mom. They tell their mom, "We did it! We found an apartment. We'll move in tomorrow." What did they find? They found an apartment. The boys found an apartment. When will they move in? Tomorrow. They'll move in tomorrow. How do they feel? They're very excited. They're very excited because they found an apartment. And when will they move in? Tomorrow. They'll move in tomorrow. Who will move in tomorrow? Well, Tony and Dan will move in tomorrow. Will Sarah move in tomorrow? No, Sarah's not moving. Sarah won't move in tomorrow. Tony and Dan will move in tomorrow. How does Sarah feel? She's very proud. Sarah is very proud. Who is she proud of? She's proud of Tony and Dan. She's proud of her sons. Why is she proud of them? She's proud of them because they're becoming independent. She says, "You're finally becoming independent." Who are finally becoming independent? Tony and Dan. Tony and Dan are finally becoming independent. And how does Sarah feel? She's proud. Sarah's very proud of Tony and Dan. She's proud of Tony and Dan. Are the boys proud? Now, the boys aren't proud. The boys are excited. They're excited to move in to their first apartment. Sarah is very proud of them. She says, "I'm very proud of you. You're finally becoming independent." The next day, the boys move in. They have a big party with their friends. When do the boys move in? The next day. The next day, the boys move in. Where do they move into? Well, they move into their new apartment. The apartment. The boys move into their new apartment. What do? Oh, they have a big party. They throw a party with their friends. Do they throw a big party or do they throw a little party? They throw a big party. They have a big party with their friends. Who do they have a party with? Well, with their friends. They have a big party with their friends. In fact, every night they have parties at their apartment. Where do they have parties? At their apartment. When do they have parties? Every night they have parties at their apartment. Who has parties every night at their apartment? The boys, Tony and Dan. Tony and Dan have parties every night at their apartment. How do they feel? Oh, very, very happy. Very happy. They're very happy. Why are they happy? Oh, because now they have their own place and they can have parties all the time. Are the boys still Mama's boys? No, they're not Mama's boys. Yay! Why are they happy? Because they have their own place. They have their own apartment. What do they do at their own apartment? Well, they have parties every night. Do they have parties sometimes? No, not sometimes. Every night. All the time they have parties. Where do they have parties? Well, at their apartment. They have parties all the time at their apartment. So how do the boys feel? Very happy. The boys are very happy because now they have their own place and they can have parties all the time. How does Sarah feel? She's very happy too. Very, very happy too. Why is she very happy? Because her boys are finally growing up. Are her boys becoming independent? Yes, her boys are becoming independent. Her boys are growing up. Whose boys are growing up? Sarah's. Sarah's boys are finally growing up. And how does Sarah feel? Sarah is very happy because her boys are finally growing up. So, Sarah, Tony, and Dan are very, very happy. Okay, that is the end of the mini story for Mama's Boys. See you next time. This is AJ. Bye-bye. 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 Mama's Boys. Sarah recently retired from her job of 23 years. Because she's retired, Sarah has less money than she used to. She has enough money for herself, but she has a problem. She has two sons. One is 23, and the other is 26. Both sons work. However, they both live at home with their mom. They eat her food and expect her to cook for them. They also expect Sarah to clean their rooms. The boys never do any chores at all. Also, they don't pay for food or anything else. In short, they're Mama's Boys. Sarah is sick of the situation. She thinks, they're adults. They should be living on their own and not still living with their mother. I'm going to kick them out. During dinner that night, Sarah tells the boys, "It's time for you two to take responsibility. You can't live with me anymore. I'm not going to cook for you. I'm not going to clean for you. You need to grow up and get your own apartments." The boys are very upset. They complain. They rant and rave. "You're a terrible mom. How can you do this? We're your children. It's not fair." The boys continue to rant and rave for 57 hours without stopping. But Sarah won't budge. She tells them, "You have 1 month to find your own apartment. No more whining. Just do it." Then Sarah leaves the room. The next day, the boys come to the kitchen for breakfast, but there's no food. Sarah refuses to cook for them. She says, "You have jobs. Get your own food and make it yourself." The boys can't believe it. This happens every day. The boys gradually lose weight because they won't cook for themselves. Finally, on the 28th day, they look for an apartment. They find a 2-bedroom for $750 a month. They sign a 1-year lease. They rush home to tell their mother. They're very excited because this will be their first apartment. They tell their mom, "We did it! We found an apartment! We'll move in tomorrow." Sarah says, "I'm very proud of you. You're finally becoming independent." The next day, the boys move in. They have a big party with their friends. In fact, every night they have parties at their apartment. They're very happy because now they have their own place and they can have parties all the time. Sarah is happy too because her boys are finally growing up.